Hi, everyone. Welcome to Epic Chats. My name is Jennifer Shu, and I'm the head of US development at Epic Foundation. So Epic fights to change the lives of disadvantaged children and youth around the world through our portfolio of high impact social organizations. So first, a bit of housekeeping. Today's chat will include an opportunity to ask our amazing guest your burning questions. So during the of them, please add them to the questions tab or upvote the ones that you would like answered. And with that, over to you, Debbie.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie, and I head up Epic in the UK. We're really excited to welcome Fredrik today on our Epic Chat. Many of you, of course, know him already. He's the CEO and co-founder of Boy Technology, and of course, he's one of our Epic pledges. I would say one of the cool thing about the Epic Chats is that we've been getting loads of questions about what the pledge actually is. And in short, as an entrepreneur, it's when a founder makes a promise to give a small % of their success from an exit to social good. It's not legally binding, but it's essentially a promise to yourself that if you succeed, you'll give a little back to others who are more vulnerable than you are. Pretty simple, but again, huge impact. And we hear from loads of our entrepreneurs and VCs that it's a great way, or it's been a great way to add purpose to their everyday. Of course, you also get to join an amazing community with people like Fredrik. And some of you may have heard the news, actually, that the founder of Giphy is one of our pledges, and they, of course, have just been acquired by Facebook. So that's really exciting for us, our pledger communities, and, of course, the organization that we support. And kind of in that vein, many of you know that at Epic, we're all about giving back. And for each webinar in our series, our speaker chooses one organization from our portfolio of 26, which are in our portfolio. They're all high impact organizations that help vulnerable children and youth around the world. Today, Fredrik has chosen to support Friends International, which is an absolutely phenomenal organization in Cambodia. They offer a holistic approach to tackling issues faced by vulnerable children and youth and basically help them rebuild their lives. We would love to help you support us, and you'll see there, I've always wanted to do that, so there you go. Have a chat, give a little back, donate here, every little helps, and even more so in the time of COVID. So if you can, please do join us. And without any further ado, I will hand right back over to you, Jennifer and Fredrik.
Thank you, Debbie. So Fred, thank you so much for joining us today from Stockholm. You're a serial entrepreneur, you're a competitive cross-country skier, you're ex-Swedish Armed Forces. We're going to come back to all of that. But first, I hope you can take us back in time a little bit to when you became an entrepreneur at the age of 12. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I mean, I've been a part of the Epic family for, I think, a year and a half. And I mean, all interactions I've had with you guys and with other pledgers have been just pure pleasure. And I hope that other entrepreneurs will join us at Epic. And I try to do my thing there and promote it and be a good ambassador and so on, because I think, I mean, especially for many entrepreneurs, for example, in Sweden, and I would say overall the Western world, where we now grow up in, we have some kind of standard level when it comes to social benefits and so on. We can't only think, in the old capitalist way of thinking, but we need to think of people all over the world, not only in Sweden and France and the US and so on, and do what we can to help them. And even though, I mean, I haven't done any big exits yet from my companies, but I really hope I will, and I'm happy to share the fruits of that in the future then. So I think, I mean, to me, it all started, I was 12, 13. I grew up in the northern parts of Sweden. I knew since I was very young that I wanted to build things. And my first project, like entrepreneurial project, was actually planting trees. So me and my cousins, we were planting trees in the forest. We were driven out to the forest like 7 o'clock in the morning and picked up 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. So we really learned what hard work was. It was a quite monotonous job, but was great because our input, there was a direct correlation between input and output. The more trees we planted, the more we made. And I'm already, then and through that, I learned two things. One, what hard work is, and second, also, the amazing feeling of when you actually have when you have the skin in the game, and when input correlates with output.
Amazing. And you also sold newspapers, right? Something with your grandfather?
Yeah, exactly. So I went from planting trees to selling newspapers. Started to sell newspapers for one of the biggest Swedish newspapers, like the Swedish Daily News. And I think I did that for 3-4 years. We tried to start our own telesales, like telesales agency and so on. It was difficult, but I looked back at that, I think a couple of months ago or a year ago or something like that. And I realized that throughout those 3-4 years, I got more than 20,000 no's, rejections. So for me, I think that was, that was the time when I really learned to detach getting rejections from who I am, and from, I learned to not take it, as personal as people usually do when getting a reaction.
Great. Yeah. So from the age of 12, you learn the value of hard work and how to sell and be able to kind of absorb 20,000 no's, which I'm sure came in handy when you pitched investors.
I think those two things are potentially the most important traits and so on for an entrepreneur. One, grit and just persistence, move on. And secondly, learn how to sell and learn how to convey ideas and do it in a compelling way. And also, I had a personal interest for technology and computers and so on. And that's, of course, you can get a lot of leverage on code and computers, which has helped me since then.
Thank you. So along the lines of, gathering skills and experiences that have really benefited you on your entrepreneurship journey, you started university at the Stockholm School of Economics, but then you did a stint at a military school. Can you tell us about that part of your journey and maybe some lessons learned there?
Yeah. So in Sweden, when I was 18, we didn't have a professional army. Today we have like a professional army, more similar to what you have in the US. But we had conscript service, and for like 10-15% of the population. So I was called in and so on. I got assigned to a language academy where I was taught Russian and like intelligence service, and it was like this, very stereotypical military experience where they took us in day one. We didn't know any languages. I didn't know Russian. My classmates didn't know Arabic or Persian. But after just above a year, they just locked us in and pretty much forced us to learn, which we were under a lot of pressure, but we learned a lot. So after just above a year, I knew Russian. My co-founder now at Voi, Douglas, he learned Persian, and then we were sent out in different parts of the world, and I was sent to Moscow to work for the Swedish Armed Forces in Moscow at the Swedish Embassy.
And what was Moscow like?
I guess since I was very young, I've had this fascination for Russia. I mean, it's scary and very fascinating at the same time. And Moscow is very much Russia. The other big city in Russia, St. Petersburg, is much closer to Europe, European mindset and so on. But Moscow is like the real Russia. The tempo is so high, and it's a quite raw city. I mean, it's a bit similar to New York or parts of New York in that sense. You feel that it's like this boom, 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 tempo 24/7 every day throughout the year. And I kind of liked it. It was super interesting to be there. I wouldn't like to raise my family there probably because the tempo is so high and, it's just this raw atmosphere. But for a couple of years to learn the language and to learn the culture and so on, it was just an incredible experience. So I recommend people to go there to just see it with their own eyes.
Got it. So after your station in Moscow, you went back to Stockholm, and I guess, scooters weren't your first foray into the sharing economy. And so when you got back to the Stockholm School of Economics, there was an incubator there, right? And you launched a hospitality management platform. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of the inspiration for that startup.
Yeah, of course. So I was in Moscow, worked for the government. I realized that, I don't want to work for the government because when you work for the government, the status quo is encouraged. And since I was young, I wanted to build things and I wanted to challenge status quo. So in the end, I quit and eventually started to work for a tech company instead in Russia. It's like the Craigslist of Russia, where people buy and sell stuff. You can buy and sell pretty much anything on that site. And came back to Stockholm, did a stint at Boston Consulting Group. Also realized that Boston Consulting Group was a bit too much of, a box. You were boxed. Amazing colleagues, some of the smartest and, some of the smartest people I met and worked with. I worked with at the Boston Consulting Group, but I felt kind of boxed. So at the same time, I started my previous company, which is called Guest It. And Guest It is like short-term rental management platform. So we help people to rent out their apartments short-term, usually. Now, throughout Corona, we are helping people to rent out their apartments or homes or buildings mid-term and long-term also. But the idea was very much that there are so many unutilized homes, apartments, houses, and so on all over Stockholm. What I saw, and we basically wanted to become like the aggregator and help to utilize those homes. And the company is still up and running. It's a nice company, nice business. My co-founders are still running it, and it was doing that. So it's very much in the sharing economy, but on the housing side. So I just dug deeper and deeper into the sharing economy and realized that transportation is an even bigger vertical potentially than what we did at Guest It. And it was through that like revelation and the insight I started to talk with my co-founders at Voi about Voi. And at the same time, we saw interesting things happening in Israel. We saw interesting things happening in Santa Monica with electric scooters, electric skateboards, and all kinds of electric vehicles. And were inspired by that and decided to go for it in Europe.
I'm going to pause you right there. I think there's a fun story behind how you and your co-founder Douglas decided to pivot into the micromobility space. So Douglas, you mentioned earlier, you had went to military school with him, so you were already familiar. But take me to that conversation where you and Doug both decided to, well, at the time, he was doing something else, you were working on Guest It. And so why did you both decide to make that pivot together to launch Voi?
So from where I was, the good thing when you have started to start companies, and when you're an entrepreneur, it's so much easier to start another one and another one and another one. Because you don't have 9 to 5. You are quite free when it comes to pretty much everything, which I really, really like. So for me, it was just I really liked the space and so on. For Douglas, he was the CEO and managing director of the most renowned or the best business incubator in Sweden. And for him, he had actually bought a really crappy e-scooter like 1 year before when he hurt his foot. So he had been riding around on that one in Stockholm, and back then, I mean, no one were using electric scooters, but he really liked it. So when we started to talk about the idea and so on, it took him probably like 2-3 days, but then he just said that, I want to do this. I love electric scooters already, and we need to democratize it and make it available to people all over Europe. And from that, we kicked off and found the 2 other co-founders, and then built the product, raised capital, and expanded.
And the addendum to that, I remember when we spoke earlier, you said you pitched him at the gym.
We were actually at the gym. That's true. So we were at the gym. I remember it. I remember exactly where we were standing and so on. And first we were like, I mean, will this ever work? It's kind of a, dumb idea perhaps. But then I think we said imagine if it works, how big it could become. And it kind of worked.
And fortunately, that wasn't your, 20,001 no. So today with Voi, I think you're in 40 European cities with over 1 million rides. So I think that pivot worked out for you really well.
Yeah, I mean, today we're in, I think, 40 cities in Europe and around 20 million rides. So a lot has happened the last 2 years.
Amazing. So let me ask you one more question, and then I'm going to start pulling questions from the audience. So, obviously these days, scooters provide a really great way to travel while keeping social distance. And so I'm curious what some of your observations are on mobility in cities during COVID.
I have quite a few, believe it or not. So I think, first of all, when cities are in lockdown, people don't move, so then mobility is dead. It's just what it is. Throughout COVID-19 in cities that were in full lockdown, we tried to operate in as many of those as possible to, support essential and key workers who had to move around when, the rest of us were in lockdown. And in other countries that weren't in full lockdown, as the one you sit in now in New York, or our friends in London or Paris, who were in full lockdown, say, take Sweden as an example, where we haven't really been in full lockdown. We've been in a very polite, light lockdown. We have continued to operate and so on. So I think on a macro level, what we see now as cities are starting to loosen up their lockdowns, we see a huge shift in transportation mode from public transportation. People don't want to go into crammed buses, metros, and so on, to bikes, to scooters, and also to private cars. Private cars, unfortunately. As a response to that, what we see in cities now all over is that decision makers, politicians are taking very drastic and active and decisive measures to promote alternatives to private cars. So the UK is legalizing e-scooters next month. The original plan was to review it next year. Cities like Paris, Milan, and so on are just fast-tracking e-scooters, e-bikes, and e-mopeds, and so on, shutting down streets from cars and so on. Because I think people have seen now is how their cities actually could look like without a lot of heavy traffic and pollution. Which is probably for most people something they want to keep to some extent. So we're quite positive now. We feel a strong macro tailwind on regulations and so on. On a micro level, it's still consumer behavior is still very unpredictable. Norway, super strong numbers. Switzerland, not as strong numbers. Germany, still weak numbers. Sweden, very strong. Italy, strong numbers and so on, which when we look at last year, doesn't make sense at all because some of these markets were very equivalent.
Great. So building off of that, I see a couple questions from the audience. And by the way, officially AMA is on fire. So please add your questions. So one person was saying that they're in Berlin before COVID, and there were 17 brands of scooters with no discernible difference. And that was true in several cities. And so they're wondering if Voi has, technologies or barriers to entry that can't be copied by competitors.
Yes. Thanks for the question, Asher. So I think, how this industry started was that some companies, including us, I think we were like 5-6 companies all over the world, raised a lot of money and saw a very strong product market fit with a very undifferentiated product. In the beginning, it was basically consumer scooters that you could buy at MediaMarkt or something, and we put on our technology and so on, but the experience was quite undifferentiated. I think as we go now, we and some of the other surviving companies have invested a lot in R&D, both on the software and the hardware side. And you're starting to see more and more differences, both on the hardware side with like suspension, with the display, with acceleration, how the vehicle looks like and behave and so on. And also on the software side with different offerings on subscriptions, on loyalty programs and so on. So we're starting to see more and more differentiation. But in the end, I think this won't be a super differentiated product in the end. The winners will be the ones who are strongest in operations, because this in the end, it's an operations game. Mm-hmm. In difference to, for example, Uber. When Uber thinks of operations, they are thinking about adjusting the surge in pricing. Operations for us is like fleet management, logistics, heavy ops. And the second thing on the regulatory side, so which players can really team up with cities and build long-term defensible moats in that.
And building off of that some more, there's a couple questions around safety. So there's, I guess, some brands that have released a built-in safety helmet, things like that. Are there other partnerships along those lines that are in the works?
Yeah. We've seen I saw one competitor today releasing some kind of helmet box attached to the scooters, and we have seen similar innovations the last year really, which I think all are good. It's a balance in the end between, does it bring user value or is it just a PR stunt? What's the cost to add a box with a helmet and so on? Mm-hmm. Third is safety. If you add a box with a helmet on the scooter and the scooter falls down 10 times before someone puts on the helmet, is the helmet really safe and so on? So there are those questions which are kind of tricky to solve, but I think all of us want to move in the right direction on safety and on sustainability, so like lifetime and clattering and so on.
So it seems that the most popular question is two parts, and I love this question, Marius. What is the most important thing to focus on when building a company from 0 to 500 employees? I know it's a big question.
I would say two things. Two things. One, clarity. One, culture, and two, like clarity. I come from the military, so I would say like clarity, chain of command. But what I mean with that is that when you scale from 0 to 500 employees, you need to have structure. And even though I'm a strong believer in flat, non-hierarchical companies and organizations, but you still need people to understand the role and responsibility into that, because otherwise you just add a lot of people and they start to run in many different directions. So I would say if you can keep culture and if you can have a clear structure at least on roles and responsibilities, those two things are key.
And I'm curious, what does culture mean to you?
it comes down to, it's values in the end, and it's, it very much starts from the founders. I think, the cultural values that the founders convey to the organization will be, in the end, those will be. I think that's the most important thing, and that will like trickle down down in the organization. If you have founders who are extremely creative, then you will get a very creative organization and so on. If you have extremely structured founders, you will get a structured organization. So it starts from that.
Mm-hmm. So the second part of the question about how to scale from 0 to 500 employees is, looking back, would you do anything differently in terms of how you've built an efficient company?
Yeah, I think I would have really solidified those two things even more around culture. Like, what is our culture? What are our values? And related to that, when you bring on new people to the company, what is like a Voyager, a Voi profile? What values do we have at Voi? Do you believe in those values? Do you agree or align with those values? That would have simplified things a lot. And secondly, on structure, also roles and responsibilities. In the beginning, we grew so fast that we just didn't have time to keep up with roles and responsibilities and so on. And in the end, that created a organizational debt that was painful to fix.
So I want to ask a question that kind of looks to the future. So in the earlier chapters of Voi, you were, hyper focused on growth. It seems like now you're, focusing on kind of increasing your product offerings and unveiling not only improvements to your original scooter, but also a bike and also a cargo bike as well. And so I guess my question now is two parts. So one, how does that strategy align with your vision for micromobility in the future? And what do you think, urban transit will look like alongside micromobility options after COVID?
So on the first question, I think we believe in multimodality. We believe that scooters are not some kind of silver bullet, but we need a urban transportation ecosystem with scooters, with bikes, with pods, with e-mopeds, with e-cars and so on, integrated into public transportation, to create offering strong enough for consumers to leave their personal car at home, and perhaps not even buy a personal car. When we do what, now we're focused on scooters. We have flirted with the e-bikes and so on before. We are partnering up with companies doing e-cargo bikes currently for all our operations. That's more a question of access to capital to invest in the other modes and so on. And the other question there, urban transit and micromobility in a couple of years. To me, now we do micromobility for people. I think micromobility for goods, logistics, deliveries, and so on also are super interesting. As e-commerce grows tremendously fast, there are more and more last mile deliveries to be done every day. We can't do those with traditional vans. We need to use e-cargo bikes. We need to build boxes where people, perhaps even on the streets, where people go and pick up their packages and so on. So I'm super excited about that as well. And I think, as I said, in the future, more integrated. There will be less private cars and taxis on the streets, more public transportation, more bikes, more scooters, and more areas in cities where only bikes, scooters, and other light vehicles are allowed next to pedestrians.
Thank you. If I may stretch a couple extra minutes, I want to pull one more question from the audience. So Miriam asks, what added value or added purpose is signing the Epic Pledge bringing to you and maybe the business, if any?
No, to me, it's about purpose for me, and also purpose for our company. We are focused, in our little sub-vertical, micromobility in cities, but we're also citizens, and we want to be good citizens in the cities we live. And if you have the opportunity, to me, being a good citizen also entails, supporting other people who are in more difficult environments and situations. And to me, it gives purpose, and I think for the organization also, it gives purpose, and we would like to involve our employees and the company more in like charity work and so on.
Thank you. So I think that's a good place to wrap up. So Fred, thank you again for joining us today. We're really looking forward to seeing how Voi will continue to reinvent the future of urban mobility. And so to all our viewers, thanks for joining us. You might have seen a pop-up on your screen to join the webinar next week. It's same day, same time. It's an Epic chat with Julian Calhoun, who is the General Director of Credit Mutual Innovation. And so he'll be talking about his journey from being a serial entrepreneur to managing a 250 million CVC. So the last favor that I want to ask all of you is that when the webinar ends, please stick around for an extra 5 seconds. You'll see a bit of a Super Bowl commercial about the Epic Pledge that Fred just shared more about. And we're just a really cool community with like-minded people who care about building a purpose into their life and business. So please stick around for those extra 5 seconds. Check out the pledge and reach out to us if you'd like to join our club. We're Epic Pledge at epic.foundation. So with that, thank you, everyone. See you next week. And Fred, thank you for sharing your journey.
Thank you for hosting. Have a good day.
Thank you.